Woo, baby. The Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, the luckiest man alive. Here with you for got another hardware review. This is exciting. I didn't think I'd be able to do another one so quickly. I believe it was last week that I did the review of the Xbox. Well, it's technically for Xbox One, but it's also for Windows 10 PCs, or for PCs in general. But the Duke controller from Hyperkin, that was a lot of fun to talk about. Heard a few people went out and bought their own of it. I love that thing. So, but ironically, we're going to go from the very large, like the Duke controller, now to the very small, what I have to review here. Now, what I'm reviewing is actually something I've done in response to kind of a little bit of a new computer philosophy or tech philosophy in a way, on my part. And that philosophy is, I talked about it, I think, in last week's Wednesday Q&A. Of course, we're recording this in May of 2018. But the philosophy basically is that I am going to put more money into hard drives and storage than I am into my actual computers, because frankly, if I lose the data, who gives a rat's fucking shit about the computer, right? Like, it's kind of meaningless. So I want to, I really want to concentrate far more on data retention than I have in the past, and just think about things that way. And in so doing, and like having my NAS be more of my main computer itself. In so doing, I went out and bought, and this is a $200 computer. Now, very quickly, I want to reiterate what I always say. There's really no such thing as a $600 or as a $200 computer. There's a $600 computer with $400 worth of adware on it, right? Okay. And so, now, but interestingly, what I ended up buying what we're reviewing here is the ASUS VivoBook E203NA-YS03 11.6-inch featherweight laptop. Okay. This is basically a netbook. All right. I mean, and in almost every sense of the word. We'll break down the tech specs in a minute. Okay. I was impressed, honestly, and I think this mainly has to do with, here's the differentiator. Here's why this computer, I think, could end up costing $200, and then we'll talk about some of the finer points on it. This is effectively the Windows version of a Chromebook. Now, not that you have to keep Windows on it. It actually can run Linux like a champ. But regardless, this is the Windows version of a Chromebook. In fact, it came with Windows 10S installed. And I think that Microsoft is probably subsidizing manufacturers to put Windows, or they were subsidizing anyway, manufacturers to put Windows 10S on their computers, or what now is being called S mode, not so much necessarily that it isn't Windows. This computer is from February 2018. That's when it was initially released. So this is a very new machine. This is not some antique that I happened to buy. But that doesn't mean that it's powerful by no stretch of the imagination. But that's why I think the computer ended up costing about $200, is because it was probably in conjunction, ASUS and Microsoft were wanting to put out there, and they've done this with HP too, with like their cloud, what do they call them? Swift, or whatever the hell the HP models are. But where this is like an education play or a business play running Windows 10S, right? This is, again, to compete with Chromebooks all the way down to the price. It was already on sale, like from $250. So I don't know, what the deal is behind that, but let's talk a little bit of the tech specs here. So it has a dual core N3350, which is one of the, now I think that's the N4500. That's the later Celerons. And from Intel, and it's 2.4 or up to 2.4 gigahertz processor. Now, most of the time when I've clocked this thing, it's actually running at like 1.1. I mean, you're not getting 2.4 gigahertz really out of this thing unless you're really, really pushing it. Then it kicks in, the turbo. It does have 4 gig of RAM, which is the only thing that made it palatable to me to buy. Is if it didn't have 4 gig of RAM, I would run into a lot of software that I couldn't even dream of running. And then it has a 64 gigabyte solid state hard drive in it. And again, it did come with Windows 10S. Okay, so this is a little guy. Like I said, this is basically a netbook. I mean, with an 11-inch, more or less an 11-inch screen. It does not have a backlit keyboard. Yeah, that would have been nice, but I didn't expect that at all. And it's not a backlit keyboard isn't exactly the biggest deal for me because, I've had keyboards memorized my whole life. I mean, I don't even have to just use the normal key. I mean, I know Colmac by heart too. So, that's not that huge of a deal for it to not have a backlit keyboard. I could go, the screen resolution is, what they call not full HD, but HD, where it's 1366 by 768 or whatever. So it's not 1080p. I didn't expect that either. It's actually not a big deal that it's not 1080p, and I'll explain why. In fact, let's start opening this up as far as critiques on this thing. The screen is the instantaneous critique to make. First off, sure, that's a low resolution, okay, and that can be a problem. And also, not only is it low resolution, but the viewing angles are positively horrendous. I mean, they are horrendous. I should say, though, before you think I'm just going to rip on this thing, I actually love this little machine, and I'll explain why as we get into it later, but that doesn't mean it's not without its flaws. Again, you're getting what you pay for, right? So the low-res screen and the terrible viewing angles, I mean, you've got to have it angled perfectly to be able to see it. To its credit, it does have a 180-degree hinge, so you could lay it flat if you wanted to. It's not like a VivoBook Flip or whatever the fuck those things are. It's nothing like that. But it is, you are able to lay the whole laptop out completely flat if you wanted to. Okay, so the screen, not a big deal. The hinge looks pretty solid, which that's kind of a rarity for laptops that honestly cost 5 times the price of this one. But the hinge does look really good, and it holds up pretty solid. Personally, I don't like the 180-degree angle. I like where laptops have like a stop point, say at more at the, I don't know, whatever, 90 plus 45 degree. Where you have a point where it can stop instead of it just keeps on going. Because if the hinge does start to weaken, well, then it's going to flop all the way back. And I think, I don't like that as far as like things lasting long. But then do you expect a $200 computer to last very long? Probably not. But regardless, so the screen, huge issue. The keyboard, while we're going down this thing. Okay, so, I guess while we're talking about the screen, the camera on it, very basic 640, 480p camera, nothing to write home about. You're going to cover that shit up anyway. And, a lot of laptops, again, consider the price of this. Because, again, laptops 5 times its price will often have shitty, cameras in them as well. In fact, the ASUS ZenBook 3 that I am using this sort of in replacement of, that was a premium product, a high-end premium laptop, okay, that, it had all these great tech specs and everything, made of pure aluminum, blah, 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 and the camera on it was a shitty-ass 640 by 480 camera, resolution camera. I mean, it was the webcam, and it was terrible. So that's not exactly a knock against it. I mean, there's one there, you cover it up, and that's the end of it. I mean, and I think this is true for most laptops. If you want an actual great webcam experience, you usually buy a separate, Logitech or even, Microsoft LifeCam camera or webcam or something like that, to be able to do it. So not that huge of a deal as far as that goes. Go down to the keyboard. The keyboard, again, not backlit, but it is full size. The main thing for me with any laptop or with any keyboard in general, because I also buy keyboards, say, to use with my phone, the main thing that matters to me is that I almost, and this is a personal peeve, I almost exclusively will use the right shift key. Like I can't even think of whenever I use the left shift key. I almost exclusively use the right. And a lot of times, netbooks in particular, back in the day, they would shrink the right shift key so you could have full-size arrow keys, okay, on the side of the keyboard. I just can't deal with that because I'll just keep missing it and I can't type and it really sucks. Fortunately, this comes with a full-sized right shift key and instead shrinks the arrow keys. Perfectly fine trade-off for me. As far as typing on it, yeah, I mean, it types like a breeze. Like I have no problem with the keyboard. It travels okay. I mean, like it feels pretty good to type on. I don't miss keys really. Some of the keys, some of like the function keys and other things are a little small, but I barely ever press those. Bottom line being, can I type quickly and respond quickly? Yep. So, it works for me. That's, that's fine and dandy. So no problem with the keyboard. The speakers are fairly loud, obviously not crisp, not great speakers. Speakers are an afterthought. That's okay. I mean, for a lot of laptops, honestly, they can be an afterthought. Admittedly, my ZenBook 3 from ASUS, of course, they had Harman Kardon speakers, and boy, could you hear those. I mean, that was impressive sound that you got out of that. Not the case with what I call the Featherweight. That's what I've decided, because I think the term, so it's the ASUS VivoBook E203NA. YSO3 specifically. VivoBook is the dumbest. I don't know what the fuck that means. I think it sounds ridiculous. Like, it does not roll off the tongue, and they're certainly not going to be selling this thing in India. I mean, like, that is such a shitty ass name. ZenBook's a great name. I don't expect them to call this thing a ZenBook because they wouldn't want to mess with their premium line. But VivoBook? I don't get it. I suppose I could look into it. Maybe it has some grand meaning, but I don't know. So I just call it the Featherweight because it is very light. Like, I have to give it that. It weighs in at about 2 pounds. It feels lighter than my ZenBook 3, which the whole purpose of the ZenBook 3 was to be light. And also thin. This is not as thin. It's probably twice or 3 times the thickness of my ZenBook 3. So this is a thicker little netbook. But let me tell you, I think that this is a good thing, and I got this by design. Okay, I am very skeptical of, and I don't know how much research has been done on this. I am very, very skeptical of Ultrabooks. I am very skeptical of this thin and light. You know, even like, well, especially when it's aluminum, even the Carbon X1s, like, they've gone a little thicker with the carbons. And I think what Lenovo probably learned, and I think what a lot of people are, or what people are eventually learning, and you don't hear about it because people are just like, oh, well, time to buy a new computer, and they get all excited about buying a new computer, and I understand that. But I think the really thin computers, the really thin Ultrabooks, I think they run into heat dissipation problems, and I think it kills the computers early. I already had to repair the fan on my ZenBook 3. Again, my ZenBook 3 isn't even a year old, and I've had to do so much work on it. And I think part of that is that, you know, if you're doing any kind of computing on it, it runs way too hot for for how much all those parts are compressed into that really slim body. I think that's a problem. So I think that, you know, bigger laptops that give you more space for all these parts to breathe, I think that's necessary. I mean, we're just not there yet where fanless computers are, you know, a legit thing, right? I mean, I think even Microsoft is running into this problem with their Surface, computers, particularly with like the 2-in-1s that they put out there, those Surfaces, because there was the latest one, was the Surface Pro 4 or 5, whatever it was, that was fanless. If you got the Core i5, I think they're running into heat problems with that. Or if they're not, I think they're finding out that they're happening. The laws of thermodynamics are what they are, and I don't think you can best them. And I mean, Intel's had that problem for a while. They've been trying to get under 10, 11 nanometers for so long. And I mean, you know, you run, there's heat issues, bottom line. I mean, I'm kind of going left field here, but bottom line being there's heat issues. So I don't trust Ultrabooks. I don't trust these ultra thin computers. I like light, and this is plenty light. It's not super thin, but it's plenty fucking light. I think light is great, but thin, yeah, I don't know. And it's funny because people might want to say to me, well, what about the MacBook? That's really thin and light, and people just love their Apples, and Apples last forever. Ask people about the MacBook specifically, okay? I mean, the MacBook Air is a whole other ballgame, but ask them about the MacBook specifically, and they'll tell you that it's not until like the most recent generation of that, which has only been out for a few months, that finally Apple got the MacBook right. I mean, I think there are genuine engineering problems here. Okay, so I don't trust Ultrabooks anymore. I just don't. So anyway, but this doesn't fall prey to that because, you know, it's a thicker model, and I think it's got plenty of room to breathe. Not that it does much breathing. So let's talk a little bit about performance. Oh, no. Before we get into performance, another major flaw with this. So the keyboard's fine. Screen sucks. Keyboard's fine. Speakers are passable. Whatever. You're not going to really use those anyway. It has a full, as far as ports. Well, I'll get into the ports next because that's actually a really big positive to talk about. But I mean, you have a headphone jack that you can plug into anyway. So the touchpad on this is terrible. Not terrible in that it's imprecise or anything, but if it gets any kind of foreign substance on it, shall we say? No, that's not what you're thinking. If it gets any kind of foreign substance on it, like any kind of oil, or even like if you just had like a piece of cheese or something and then you go to touch it from, and I don't know, maybe it's some nice Alpine Cabot cheese or something, and it gets on there, like it just stops working. Just stops and it just gets erratic. It has two clickable buttons, or well, they're clickable as in you can push down on the touchpad, and it's a good size touchpad. I'll give it that. But yeah, I mean, the slightest thing on your fingers and it just stops working. But myself, not a huge deal, because I like to, as often as I can, I like to use a mouse. I always keep a mouse with me because a mouse means you're going to get shit done. Like, that it's time to get serious. So not a huge deal with the touchpad. It's passable, but it's just passable. It's not like at the point of terrible, but it's just passable. But let's talk about ports. This is where this little guy actually shines very much. In fact, best my ZenBook 3 by a long shot, which only had a headphone jack on it, and then just one USB-C port that doubled as the power port. So this has a separate power port. Okay, that's good. Power's not taking up another port. It has two USB 3.0 ports on it. Nice little selection there. And then it also has, amazingly, USB-C on it. I mean, really, really impressive. Now, I don't think it's Thunderbolt, and I can't exactly test it, because what would be really fun is if because like with Thunderbolt 3, you can, which takes the shape of a USB-C port, you can connect like external video cards. Right. So like you could hook up a 1080 Titan or something to this, and and yeah, the processor sucks, but man, your video card, you're snappy. But no, I don't think it's Thunderbolt, but I haven't really tested that part on it. So I've been rolling with this for a little over a couple weeks now. So that's plenty of testing time for something, because I could wait a year, but then in a year, the new model is going to be out. So you can't take that long to talk about testing these things. But yeah, USB-C port, has the headphone jack on it, and it does have a micro SD card slot, which isn't bad, and actually makes up for, because you only have 64 gig of onboard storage, you get a 128 gig, 256 gig, 400 gig micro SD card, for anywhere between $40 to $120. And, you've quadrupled or quintupled the amount of the amount of storage space on this device. So that's kind of a nice feature that it has that, and the micro SD card sits in flush. Like it's one of those push-in ones where it sits perfectly flush, and so it's not going to be jutting out from it. It's not an eyesore on the device at all. But no Ethernet port. That would have been nice if it had that, but it doesn't. That's okay. It does have a full-size HDMI port, which that's pretty handy, and I've already been making use of that. So the port situation on it is really great. In fact, the port situation is better than a lot of laptops, even some premium laptops that you could purchase today. So that's an advantage, is that you can kind of throw just about anything at it, and you can plug it in. And it is running with Bluetooth 4.1. So it's got that. It has wireless AC. Okay, great. It's running with the latest standards on those. Not that the wireless is the fastest thing ever, and nor is the Bluetooth, but that's partly more to do with the processing power, the lack of processing power that this has. But yeah, let's talk about that processing power. So the 4 gig of RAM is legit. Whatever, that's totally fine. The processor is just a terrible, terrible weak point. This thing is ass slow. It is ass slow. Like web pages can take a minute, or not a minute, but they're not instantaneous. That's for sure. Don't try opening a bunch of tabs, because holy fuck will you're just not going to get anywhere. I have had points where I can run 2 browsers on there, but there's varying points where, it throttles back, and then those 2 browsers barely even open. Now, if you're running actual software, like offline software on it, For example, if you're running Microsoft Office, or if you're running Audacity or LibreOffice, or if you're running, hell, even doing some gaming. Of course, I already played TIE Fighter on it. Anything you're doing offline and on the device itself that's not web browser based is pretty good. I mean, it's fairly clippy, like you don't really notice the slowdown whatsoever. I mean, and it just kind of goes to show just how bloated and terrible, even as great as Firefox, even as great of the improvements as Firefox has made since it became Firefox Quantum, web browsers just destroy computers, But then, today for most people, without a web browser, what's a computer? Sure, I completely understand. The best browser I've seen able to run on this thing so far was actually Opera. Opera was running the smoothest of the bunch that I've tested on it. Even Microsoft Edge ran like a sloth. It was terrible. It was really, really bad. Now, admittedly, so when you get a computer with Windows that comes with Windows 10S, you have a window of time where you can update for free to Windows 10 Pro. Now, that's nice because that can be nice because it's not even Windows 10 Home, which a lot of, again, premium laptops come with normally. You can get Windows 10 Pro. I didn't spend 5 seconds with Windows 10S. I was instantly looking up, okay, where do I go? And it is a little confusing. You have to go to the Microsoft store to be able to, the app, not to an actual Microsoft store. You have to go to the app, the Microsoft store, to update, and they don't make it exactly easy to find, to update for free to Windows 10 Pro. You barely even have to restart to make the changes. I mean, like it just, you hit it and it takes a little while, and next thing you know, you're running Windows 10 Pro. Because with Windows 10S, you can't install Win32 apps. You can only use stuff from the Microsoft App Store. And that's completely unacceptable to me because, how am I going to do podcasts? I can't run Audacity. I can't do all this other shit. So I updated to Windows 10 Pro pretty quickly. There's the chance, and if I thought better of it, and you can't go back, if I thought better of it, maybe I should have messed around with how it ran with Windows 10S. With Windows 10S, that dual-core processor might be great, because of the limited way that it's running. But I don't know that that's true because Windows 10S is still, the reason you can update to Pro is because effectively it's Windows 10 Pro, running underneath all that, just in a very limited fashion. So this thing is, once you get into any kind of web browsing, it is terribly, terribly, terribly slow. There might be some browsers I might try out, like whatever they renamed Cubzilla to, and some other ones that I'd be interested to see if they run any better. But I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of hope for that. So if web browsing is a major, major deal to you, like it's a huge deal, and you're used to having 50 to 60 tabs open and all this other horse shit, which I don't. I limit it to 8 at all times. In fact, with this, I limit it to less. This is not the computer for you at all. Like, don't even think about using it. It just won't work. But now I will say, actually, where it does run a little faster, like I said, this does run Linux like a champ. And I hooked up a USB drive with Tails on it. Of course, the Tails operating system, which is Tor. That ran like a dream. That ran like a motherfucker. That was awesome. So if you wanted a little $200 computer that you're going to consistently run Tails off of, say with a persistent Tails partition or something on the USB drive, or I don't know if you could do it off of the micro SD card, but that'd be nice. This is a great computer for that. Like, it really, really handled Tails very, very well, and it handled a couple of Linux live distros that I put on very, very well. And Firefox did run significantly better under those operating systems than it does under Windows. But yeah, now here's the thing with this, okay? Because it's incredibly slow, right? The interesting thing, I almost see this as an advantage. Okay, and I'll explain why. I almost see it as an advantage because it forces you mentally to, if this is what you've got and you're going around and you're carrying it, it forces you mentally to only do one thing at a time. Do you get me? And this was something that I liked about Chromebooks back, years ago when they first came out, was that Chromebooks, were, at the time, like, apps would take the whole screen whenever you had it open. You couldn't really resize things, blah, blah, blah. Chromebooks at the time, like it really forced you, because of the limited nature of the operating system at the time. I mean, now Chromebooks are going to be able to run Linux apps, so that's not limited anymore, and you can run Android apps and everything. So I mean, that's becoming a full-on platform, or that's becoming a quote-unquote real operating system again, or now. But I liked, and I've talked about this before, I liked the limited nature of Chromebooks because it did force you really to only do one thing at a time and to concentrate on that. This is kind of the same situation where, in fact, yesterday, it was a Sunday, I got so much shit done. I mean, I just got tons of shit done. And the reason I got it done is because all I had was this little Featherweight, my little netbook computer, or what's effectively a netbook computer here. Okay. I had the ASUS, the E203NA. All right. And I could only open, I could more or less only have one thing going at a time in any practical fashion. And so I would have to concentrate on one task, and I couldn't have my computer like I'm used to doing computing, where I have like 20 different things going on in the background. I'm ripping a CD, or I'm converting, some AAC files, and I'm making a YouTube video, and I'm encoding a video for YouTube or something. And, I have a bunch of torrents downloading, and I've got, like 3 browsers, open and with all this. I mean, like, you see what I mean? This forced me to only do one thing. And so doing one thing at a time, I got a shit ton done, believe it or not. Multitasking, not good. I haven't always felt that way, but right now I'm feeling that way. And I was so pleased with myself with how much I ended up getting done with this little guy. In fact, I'm recording this podcast on it right now, connected to, I'm in the BDSM studio here, but connected to my mixer. And I mean, and it does a hell of a job. I'll tell you that. If you just want like a little portable computer to do some podcasting on, this is a great machine for that. I mean, Audacity runs like a dream on it. And I mean, it maybe takes double the time that a better computer would do to encode everything, and like when you're mixing it down to an MP3, or if you're doing some compression or normalizing, like, okay, it takes a couple extra minutes, but not that huge of a deal, for the portability of what you're getting. And that's another thing, battery life. Okay. This thing gets, I think on average, I'm getting like 10 hours of battery life out of it. I mean, that's awesome. I'm literally getting that. That's pretty exciting. I don't even think about going to plug it in. I don't, throughout the day. Like, I plug it in at the end of the night, just about. And that's something that really needs to be resolved in some way, because Linux has gotten to the point where Linux can run much faster and smoother on lower end hardware. Linux has really not licked the battery life problem. Even if you're using like Ubuntu or something, with XFCE. Yeah, the battery optimization that Mac OS and Windows 10 have engaged in, and part of that is because they have such a close relationship with a lot of, with manufacturers, and of course Apple makes their own product, has been you see the advantage. Windows 10 is much better on battery, and that was a major point for Windows 10. It's much better on battery than I think just about any Linux distro. That hasn't always been true. It used to be kind of the opposite, but that seems to be the case now. And wow, does the battery life show on this fucking thing. I mean, there's going to be a time down the road where I think also to its credit, the instant that I brought it up to Windows 10 Pro, the first update that it did is it went right to grab the Windows 10 April update, which, not every computer has already been cleared for that. This has already been cleared for it. And so, got the April update on it. But I mean, down the line, when we get into Redstone 5 and 6 and 7, Windows 10 is going to be doing things that I think this computer never imagined Windows 10 should be doing. And then it's really going to become obsolete pretty quickly. That's not quick. That's a couple of years from now, but you get my point. So the one nice thing that I verified about this is how well does it run Linux. And I mean, Ubuntu runs great on it, all these different things, and pretty much all of the features. I didn't run into a single hardware issue of any kind. Like the touchpad worked out of the gate, which that's sometimes an issue, especially with Chromebooks. Everything seemed to just function beautifully right out of the box when you popped in Ubuntu. So that's that's something I'll do, like if time goes on, like I don't know why hardware wise, why this thing should fail at all. I'll just put Linux on it if Windows becomes even more of a dog than it already is. But to Windows 10's credit, the battery life that it allows for on this thing is fucking amazing. So again, the real weak spot with it is, at least in Windows, is the web browser. The web browsers just run so terribly on it. But it's fun. It's a fun little machine to crank out some emulators. It runs MAME beautifully. Not that that's hard. NES games, Sega Genesis. I mean, you go down the list of them. It's great for doing all of that, which that's a lot of fun. And it has the full HDMI port on it, so it's easy to connect it to a TV and make it happen. And you just hook up a little 4-port USB hub to it, and you can plug in all your joysticks. I mean, and away you go. It's really, really nice for that. And that's always something I like to have in the back of my mind. I mean, granted, a Raspberry Pi can be great for all that shit, right? But this is double the price of a decent Raspberry Pi setup, because a Raspberry Pi is only $35, but to have like the case, power, and, SD card and all that different shit, I mean, you end up usually hashing out close to $100. And this is pretty much double that. In fact, on a sale, I'm sure you could get this for, closer to $150 or something. And it's all inclusive. So I'm not saying don't buy a Raspberry Pi. By all fucking means, buy a Raspberry Pi. I'm just saying that, the value is here. There is comparable value to what you would do with a Raspberry Pi. So great, it's great for that sort of thing. And a lot of classic gaming, it's great for that. Like I was playing Star Wars, I was playing Episode 1 Racer, which is the pod racing game that they finally re-released for modern systems. I was playing that. It played that beautifully. A lot of the classic games, obviously, it can play like a dream. Even a few modern ones, it does pretty well rocking them. But, of course, you can only store so many because of the limited, the somewhat limited hard drive space, or you have to store it onto the micro SD card. But then, there's challenges as far as speed that can come with that. So just something to, to consider as far as that goes. But again, overall, I really like this machine, and its limitations I almost see as advantages. Like I said, being forced to more or less do one thing at a time. I'm really enjoying that right now. Like that's really helping me out quite a bit. But yeah, if only, and I'll update you, if I find a web browser that runs really nicely on this, that can load pages decently and everything, I'll tell you about it. And because that's kind of its one little flaw that would keep it from being like a pretty good daily driver, is that just the web browsing experience is so terrible no matter what web browser you're using. It's just not, it's really not clippy enough. It's not there. But like email, shit, you toss on Claw's Mail or Thunderbird or something. It runs those great, and no problem loading stuff up, and makes a great little email machine. There's a lot of fun that could be had with this, and a lot of advantages to be taken with this little $200 computer. So again, this is the ASUS VivoBook E203NA YSO3 11-inch featherweight laptop, and it's, like I say, it's pretty much a netbook, which I love netbooks, and that's not new. I've talked about that on Sovereign Tech Prime episodes many times. I was a huge fan of netbooks when they came out. Just amazing what they could do. I had one of the original PCs from ASUS. ASUS started the netbook craze, where they had the little 7-inch one. Of course, it didn't take them long to come out with 9-inch ones, and then eventually get to 11-inch, which is where we're at now. I like that kind of portability design, and again, the limited nature of it. I'm okay with that. And this thing hasn't gotten too hot either, which again is important, because I think that did a lot of damage to my ZenBook. And it feels fairly sturdy. Not really, the plastic doesn't really creak or anything like that. That's kind of nice. So it's something I feel comfortable carrying around. It's hilarious in the marketing materials for it. Like if you look it up on Amazon, and there's a link in the show notes if you want to get one for this episode. If you look at the marketing for it, like they're like, oh yeah, this is great for business and all this other stuff. Now, I don't know a fucking business that doesn't, need a web browser for something, because they're doing some kind of cloud computing or portal situation or web portal situation or whatever. No way. like if I were a business, I wouldn't buy this for a second, to give to employees and have them use. Oh, fuck no. Unless, again, there's the chance, and I feel bad, I should have tested it. Unless Windows 10S, for whatever reason, just runs that fucking great on this machine, on this low end hardware. But then you're also stuck with, because in Windows 10s, you don't have a choice of web browser. You're stuck with Microsoft Edge. And I don't know how a lot of businesses might take issue with that, might have a problem with that. So I don't know. Anyway, the marketing material is bullshit, but then marketing's always bullshit. What's the old H.G. Wells line? Like, advertising is legal lying or something like that. Is legalized lying. Well, anyway, but it is a fun computer. I recommend it as long as you understand its very limited nature, how slow it is. If you just need a little something, I mean, you could have a lot of fun with it. If you toss Linux on it, if that's what you wanted to do, you're going to have a much nicer machine when you do that. But the battery life isn't going to be as solid as it is under Windows. But that's something to consider. So anyway, that's it. Just want to do a short little hardware review here for this new little computer that's going to be a big part, frankly, of Sovereign Tech, because it's going to be, traveling around with me. And whenever I need to, do remote episodes and things like that, it's probably going to be done in some form or fashion using the Featherweight, which is what I'm calling the computer. So anyway, more content to come out this week, but that's enough for this episode. I will see all of you on the other side.